The invaders came without warning. They arrived in silent, monstrous ships, blotting out the stars above humanity's outermost colonies. The Zalzareth, an empire that had crushed hundreds of civilizations beneath its clawed feet, assumed this war would be like all the others, a short, brutal extermination. They were wrong. The first colony fell within hours, its defenses shattered by orbital bombardment. The second fought longer, its militia desperately holding the line until their weapons overheated and their bodies gave out. The third was where things changed. New Avalon. A prosperous world, rich in resources and culture, it had no standing army, no warships, no defenses beyond a few police drones. When the Zalzareth landed, they expected frightened cattle. Instead, they found rage. The humans of New Avalon did not beg for mercy. They did not surrender. They fought tooth and nail, barricading streets, turning mining equipment into weapons, and rigging entire city blocks to explode. For 3 weeks, the Zalzareth slaughtered them by the thousands, their reptilian generals growing frustrated at the sheer stubbornness of their prey. The humans fought even as their cities burned, as their skies turned black with smoke. Yet it was never a question of if New Avalon would fall, only when. But then, the skies darkened for another reason. At first, the Zalzareth thought it was an eclipse, a cosmic anomaly, something natural. Then the thunder came. The first orbital strike hit the Zalzareth command ship like a divine hammer. Its shields collapsed in an instant, and in the next, a blinding lance of energy split it in two. The ground beneath the invaders trembled as the air filled with sonic booms. The sky tore open, revealing monstrous black-armored warships descending from the heavens. The Dreadnoughts had arrived. Each one was a city of death, bristling with railguns the size of skyscrapers and missile bays that could reduce continents to rubble. Their hulls bore the scars of 100 wars, yet they moved with terrifying purpose. From their bellies, dropships poured out like swarming locusts, descending upon the ruined streets of New Avalon. And from those dropships came them, the Terran Marines. 8 feet tall in powered armor, their visors glowed with the cold, mechanical rage of their kind. Their weapons did not fire projectiles, they launched devastation. The Zalzareth, the conquerors of 1,000 worlds, finally felt what it was to be prey. They had believed humanity was weak, a fledgling race, barely out of their cradle. But they had forgotten one truth, one whispered legend among the few species who had survived war with mankind. If you strike at humanity, then God help you when their war machines arrive. And as the Dreadnoughts rained fire upon the invaders, as the Terran Marines crushed them beneath their boots, as the last surviving Zalzareth general screamed into the void for mercy. No one answered. Only death remained. The Zalzareth had never known fear like this. Their empire had conquered and annihilated over 100 species. They had burned planets, crushed rebellions, and turned entire civilizations into footnotes in history. But nothing had prepared them for humanity's wrath. New Avalon's ruins trembled as the Dreadnoughts opened fire from orbit, their mass drivers launching hypervelocity rounds that tore apart Zalzareth landing craft before they could flee. Any warships that attempted to escape were shredded by precision railgun fire. On the ground, the Terran Marines moved like specters of death. They advanced through the ruined streets with ruthless efficiency, their towering power armor built for destruction. Their weapons, each one more powerful than the heaviest ordnance in the Zalzareth arsenal, ripped through their enemies as if their vaunted armor was made of paper. A Zalzareth warrior, standing over 7 feet tall with scaled muscle honed for war, lunged at one of the human giants. It swung its plasma blade down, expecting to cleave through armor. The Marine barely flinched. He caught the alien's arm mid-strike, crushing bone and scale with one hand before driving his fist into its skull. The Zalzareth's head exploded in a spray of greenish blood. The others hesitated. The conquerors of 100 species hesitated. The Marine took a step forward, and in a voice that rumbled like a god's judgment, he spoke one word. "Run!" Panic spread through the Zalzareth forces like wildfire. Their commanders screamed at them to hold position, but it was useless. Their carefully planned invasion had turned into a nightmare. The humans were not fighting for territory. They were not even fighting for revenge. They were erasing them. A Zalzareth officer, one of the few still trying to maintain order, barked orders into his comms. "Send reinforcements! We need air support!" He never finished. A railgun round punched through his body, tearing him apart before detonating a plasma charge behind him. The entire street lit up in a blue fireball. Above, a Terran gunship swooped through the sky, its engines roaring. It rained death upon the fleeing aliens, autocannons shredding those who tried to escape the massacre. The Zalzareth fleet in orbit had already been crippled. Their invasion force was being butchered. And then, the final horror arrived. From the lead Dreadnought, a transmission echoed across the battlefield. A voice, cold, calculated, filled with the fury of a species that had been underestimated for too long. "This is Admiral Elias Kane of the Terran Federation Navy. Your forces have invaded sovereign human space. You will receive no mercy. You will not be given the chance to retreat. You will burn." And then the exterminators deployed. These were not Marines. These were something else, something worse. 10 feet tall in exoskeletal armor, their weapons vaporized anything they touched. Their mere presence sent a cold terror through even the most battle-hardened Zalzareth warriors. They were the ones sent when humanity wanted a war to end. When the Zalzareth High Command received the footage, what little of it remained, they did something they had never done before. They ordered a full retreat, not a strategic withdrawal, not a regrouping maneuver. They fled. The Zalzareth Empire had learned too late. Some species cowered when invaded. Some surrendered. Humanity? Humanity didn't just fight back. They ended you. The Zalzareth forces tried to retreat. Tried. Their last remaining warships in orbit activated emergency jump drives, desperate to escape the massacre below. But the humans had anticipated this. "Target their FTL drives," Admiral Kane commanded. "No one leaves." From the Dreadnoughts, beams of concentrated energy lanced through the darkness. Zalzareth ships, already battered and burning, had their engines carved out like tumors. Their escape routes became death traps, their desperate attempts to flee turning into slow, agonizing destruction as human warships picked them apart. One after another, the Zalzareth vessels exploded, their debris joining the graveyard of ships now orbiting New Avalon. For the first time in their history, the Zalzareth had encountered an enemy that did not simply repel them. Humanity didn't just win wars. They erased the concept of their enemy's victory from existence. But the worst was yet to come. The exterminators marched through the city ruins, their armor gleaming under the firelit sky. They did not speak. They did not take prisoners. They only hunted. A surviving Zalzareth officer, one of the few who had managed to regroup, hid behind a crumbling building, watching in horror. His warriors, once proud conquerors, now scrambled like vermin, gunned down one by one. A nearby comrade, a younger warrior, trembled. "Commander, what do we do?" The officer swallowed, his throat dry. "We surrender." The words tasted like ash. His people had never surrendered before. It was unthinkable, unacceptable. But as he watched a single exterminator tear through a Zalzareth heavy unit with his bare hands, ripping its reinforced armor open like paper, he knew they had no choice. He activated his communicator, broadcasting on all frequencies. "This is Commander Zora of the Zalzareth invasion fleet. We surrender." "We surrender!" The battlefield fell silent. The remaining Zalzareth forces dropped their weapons, kneeling on shattered streets, hands raised. For a brief moment, hope flickered in the commander's heart. Perhaps the humans would show mercy. Then the reply came. It was not Admiral Kane who responded. It was a woman's voice, cold, calm, and merciless. "Surrender?" A pause. "No." And then the exterminators opened fire. They didn't hesitate. They didn't stop. They executed the Zalzareth with terrifying efficiency. No survivors, no prisoners, no chance. Commander Zora barely had time to scream before a plasma round vaporized his skull. The last of the invaders died choking on their own blood, their bodies left where they fell. New Avalon was stained green with Zalzareth blood, and humanity did not mourn them. This wasn't just revenge. This was a message. Days later, the Zalzareth homeworld received the transmission. Their emperor, once feared across the stars, watched in horror as Admiral Kane's face appeared on the screen. "This was your only warning," he said. "You came to our worlds, you slaughtered our people, and now you know the cost." Behind him, footage of the extermination played. Zalzareth bodies, burned and broken, their warships reduced to drifting wrecks. Their warriors, mighty conquerors, hunted like animals. Admiral Kane leaned forward, his gaze like a blade. "If you so much as breathe in the direction of humanity again, we will not stop at your fleet. We will come for your worlds, we will come for your cities, and we will turn your entire species into a memory." The transmission cut. Silence fell in the Zalzareth war room. The Emperor, a being who had once commanded the death of billions without hesitation, trembled. For the first time in their empire's history, they knew fear. And across the galaxy, whispers spread among alien nations. The humans, the species once ignored as weak, had proven something terrifying. They were not just survivors. They were the monsters that nightmares feared. The Zalzareth Empire teetered on the edge of collapse. News of the massacre at New Avalon spread faster than any official announcement. The sheer brutality of humanity's response sent shockwaves through the Empire's war councils. Entire fleets went silent. Generals refused orders. The Emperor himself had retreated into isolation, his advisors whispering of unprecedented surrender negotiations, an act that had never been considered in Zalzareth history. But it wasn't just the Zalzareth who were watching. Across the galaxy, other empires, many of them once salivating at the thought of carving up humanity's colonies for themselves, suddenly found themselves rethinking their ambitions. The Varathi Dominion, whose insectoid warriors had long prided themselves on their insatiable expansion, abruptly withdrew their border fleets from human space. The Kalath Syndicate, a crime empire that had trafficked in human slaves for years, suddenly ceased all human trade overnight. Their stations quietly vanished from known space, their leaders going into hiding. Even the Seraphi Concordat, an advanced, isolationist race that had long deemed humanity too primitive for diplomacy, opened communication channels with the Terran Federation for the first time in history. One thing was clear. The humans had changed the rules. But humanity wasn't finished. Admiral Kane stood aboard the bridge of the TFS Judicator, his flagship Dreadnought, as the final reports from New Avalon scrolled across his display. 0 Zalzareth survivors. 0 human civilian casualties post-liberation. 0 enemy warships allowed to escape. A perfect, absolute victory. He had made his message clear. Humanity would not be prey. Not now. Not ever again. But now, there was a decision to make. Behind him, Grand Strategist Vera Lynn, one of the most feared tacticians in the Federation, spoke coldly. "We should finish them." Kane turned to her. "They're already broken." Lynn's expression remained unreadable. "Not broken enough. Their Emperor still breathes. Their fleet, though wounded, still exists. If we stop now, in a century, maybe 2, they might return." She leaned in. "Or we could ensure they never do." There was no hesitation in her voice, no cruelty, just pragmatism. Kane exhaled. He had known this was coming, knew the War Council would demand total extermination, and part of him agreed. But another part, buried deep, wondered if this was the line, the moment where humanity crossed into something else. The Zalzareth had made their choice when they invaded. They had sought to exterminate humanity. Now, humanity had to decide. Would they simply defeat their enemies? Or would they become something far worse? Kane turned to the holomap, where the Zalzareth homeworld gleamed in the darkness like a ripe fruit waiting to be crushed. One order, one command, and an empire would cease to exist. And all across the bridge, his officers awaited his decision. Would humanity's vengeance end here? Or would the skies above the Zalzareth homeworld darken next? Kane took a breath. Then he gave the order. The bridge of the TFS Judicator was silent. The weight of history hung heavy in the air as Admiral Kane's voice echoed through the command deck. "Deploy the fleet. We end this." Across the vastness of space, the Terran Federation's war machine roared to life. Hundreds of ships, dreadnoughts, battleships, destroyers, formed up in perfect precision, their massive engines burning like dying stars. At the heart of the formation, 3 of humanity's most terrifying weapons loomed. The Purifiers. They were not ships. They were judgment given form. Colossal mobile weapons platforms designed for planetary annihilation. They carried no troops, no diplomats, no terms of surrender. They carried hellfire, and they were heading straight for the Zalzareth homeworld. On Zalzar, the capital world of the Zalzareth Empire, the panic had reached its peak. The Emperor sat frozen on his throne, staring at the reports flooding in. Human ships approaching. All attempts at negotiation ignored. Orbital defenses prepared, but projected survival time, less than 1 hour. The Empire's mighty fleets were gone. Their warriors, the conquerors of 100 civilizations, had been turned to ash. And now, the humans were coming for the heart. The Emperor turned to his war council. "What do we do?" The words tasted of fear, a fear no Zalzareth had ever known. No one answered, because there was nothing left to do. The human fleet arrived. Zalzar's orbital defenses opened fire the moment they appeared, a desperate last stand. The sky burned as anti-ship cannons unleashed torrents of plasma and kinetic rounds. Defense platforms rained nuclear-tipped missiles into the void. It didn't matter. Humanity had seen this before. For every shot fired, the Terran warships retaliated with 1,000. Dreadnought railguns shredded orbital stations before they could even lock onto a target. Swarms of drone bombers weaved through the chaos, reducing planetary defenses to smoldering craters. And then, the Purifiers entered position. A silence fell over the battlefield. Even the Zalzareth defenders, those still alive, paused in horror. They had heard rumors, tales of planets reduced to cinders by human weapons. But surely even the humans wouldn't do this. And then came the transmission. Admiral Kane, staring down at the planet, his voice final and absolute. "This is the price." The Purifiers fired. The first impact shattered continents. A wave of energy unlike anything the Zalzareth had ever seen erupted across their homeworld. Entire cities, once shining beacons of their empire, were vaporized in an instant. Oceans boiled into the sky, turning the atmosphere into a choking, burning wasteland. The Emperor, watching from his palace, saw his people burning in the streets, screaming, running, falling, and then the second blast hit. Zalzar cracked. The very planet shook as tectonic plates split apart. Massive firestorms swept across the ruins of the Empire's greatest civilization. Those who had once been masters of the galaxy now choked on their own ashes. By the time the third purifier fired, Zalzar was no longer a world. It was a grave. The war was over. The Zalzareth were no more. Not just their fleets, not just their warriors, their species. The Terran fleet remained in orbit for a moment longer, watching as the fires raged on what was once a homeworld. There were no celebrations, no cheers, only silence. Admiral Kane stood on the bridge of the Judicator, staring at the broken world below. His hands gripped the railing. His officers waited for his word. He gave none, because for all the righteousness of their cause, for all the justifications and vengeance, something dark had stirred in the soul of humanity that day, and the galaxy had felt it. For the first time in history, the other empires no longer saw humans as another species to dominate. They saw them for what they truly were, a species that did not forgive, a species that did not forget, a species that, when wronged, would burn entire civilizations to the ground. And somewhere, in the void, as the Terran fleet turned away from the ruined world behind them, the galaxy whispered in fear. Humanity had arrived, and they would never be underestimated again. The galaxy would never be the same again. For weeks after the fall of the Zalzareth, an eerie silence hung over known space. No empire dared speak, no fleet dared move. The great powers that had once schemed and plotted over human colonies now waited, watching for what humanity would do next. The Varathi Dominion, whose warriors had once boasted of breaking human bones for sport, closed their borders overnight. The Kalath Syndicate, once thriving on human trafficking, purged every record of their dealings and quietly withdrew from the galactic stage. The mighty Seraphi Concordat, who had dismissed humanity as a primitive species unworthy of diplomacy, now sent envoys to Earth, hoping, praying, to establish peace before it was too late. But humanity did not answer. Humanity was silent, and that silence was worse than any war. On Earth, the leaders of the Terran Federation gathered in secret. A war had been won, a species had been erased, and now a question hung over the highest ranks of the Federation. A question no one dared ask aloud. What are we now? Admiral Kane sat in the war room, staring at the star map before him. Zalzareth space, once a vast, proud empire, was now a void. No signals, no transmissions, just darkness. Across the table, Grand Strategist Vera Lynn broke the silence. The Varathi are next. Kane didn't react. Lynn leaned forward, her voice measured, calculated. They were the first to test us. They enslaved our people. They burned our colonies. They cheered as our ships were destroyed. Now they're afraid. They've retreated. But fear fades. Memories fade. She locked eyes with Kane. If we stop here, if we let them recover, we'll fight this war again in 100 years. Kane's fingers tightened around the edge of the table. He had given the order to wipe out the Zalzareth. He had watched as their homeworld burned, as their cities crumbled to nothing. He had made humanity's message clear. But now it was different. The Varathi were not the Zalzareth. They had not invaded Earth. They had not burned New Avalon. They had enslaved humans, yes. They had fought against human colonies, yes. But they had never declared total war. Destroying them would not be vengeance. It It would be conquest. And Kane wasn't sure if humanity was ready for that. Or worse, if they already were. He exhaled and stood. No. The word cut through the room like a blade. Lynn raised an eyebrow. No? Kane met her gaze. The war is over. We won. We don't need to become what they feared we were. Silence. Then a voice from the shadows. And what if we already have? All eyes turned to the doorway. A man stepped forward, tall, severe, his uniform black with no insignia. Director Elias Crow, the head of the Terran Intelligence Directorate, the man who had orchestrated the human response from the shadows. Crow stepped into the light, his eyes cold. You think the war is over? He let out a dry chuckle. No, Admiral. It has only just begun. Kane frowned. Explain. Crow turned to the star map, tapping a few controls. The image shifted. Suddenly, it wasn't just Varathi space, or Kalath Syndicate space, or Seraphi space. It was the entire galaxy, highlighted in red, spanning hundreds of systems, was something Kane had never seen before. What is this? Kane asked, his voice low. Crow's lips curled into something resembling a smile. The truth, he said. This is what no one told you, Admiral. This is what the politicians were too afraid to reveal. This is why we were never supposed to stop at the Zalzareth. Kane's jaw tightened. What the hell are you talking about? Crow stepped forward, his voice turning razor sharp. You thought the Zalzareth were the enemy. You thought the Varathi were a threat. But they're nothing. They're just players in a game much larger than you imagined. He zoomed in. A black zone appeared at the edge of the galactic map. A place with no recorded history, no known empires. Just silence. Kane narrowed his eyes. What is that? Crow exhaled. The ones who are coming. A chill ran through the room. Even Lynn, ever composed, stiffened slightly. Kane folded his arms. Who? Crow's voice was grim. The Architects. The name sent a ripple of unease through the War Council. Kane had never heard it before. But the way the others reacted told him they had. He took a step forward. Explain. Crow's expression hardened. You think we won, Admiral, but we were never fighting for survival. He zoomed the map out further. More black zones appeared. Dozens, hundreds, entire sectors of the galaxy, empty, silent, dead. Crow's voice dropped to a whisper. We weren't fighting to live. We were fighting to prove we were worthy of it. The room went cold. Kane clenched his fists. Worthy of what? Crow turned to face him. Of existing. The silence was suffocating, and then the alarms blared. Kane turned to the holoscreen just as the message came through. Unidentified objects detected on the galactic rim. Massive energy signatures inbound. First contact imminent. Crow exhaled. They're here. Kane's blood ran cold, because in the depths of space, beyond the ruins of the Zalzareth, something was coming. And this time, humanity wasn't fighting for revenge. They were fighting to survive. The Judicator's bridge was bathed in red light. Warning sirens screamed as incoming reports flooded the main holoscreen. Kane's mind raced as he took in the data. Unknown ships, unknown energy signatures. Every single reading was beyond anything recorded in known space. They weren't Varathi. They weren't Kalath. They weren't Seraphi. And worst of all, they weren't stopping. Kane turned to his comm officer. How far are they? 5 light years out. They're not using FTL. Whatever they're doing, it's something else. Something faster. Kane's gut twisted. No empire had tech beyond the Terran Federation's FTL network. Not even the Seraphi, who had ruled the stars for millennia. Something faster than FTL? God help us. Crow stepped beside him, watching the screen with an unsettling calm. This is it. Kane clenched his jaw. You knew this was coming. Crow didn't deny it. We had suspicions. Kane turned sharply. And you didn't think we should have been informed? Crow met his glare with unreadable eyes. Would it have changed anything? Kane's fists tightened. He wanted to hit him. He wanted to grab Crow by the throat and demand why he had kept this secret. Why he had let them believe humanity was the apex predator of the stars when, all along, something else had been lurking. But there was no time for that now. Kane turned back to the holoscreen. Get me a visual. The sensor tech hesitated. Sir, we're receiving some strange interference. Kane's stomach twisted. Define strange. The tech swallowed. It's not blocking us. It's showing us something. The main screen flickered, and then it appeared. A transmission. Not words, not a message. A memory. Projected in eerie, crystalline clarity. A ruined galaxy. Stars burned out. Planets cracked open like eggs. Entire sectors of space ripped apart by forces beyond comprehension. A voice, cold, distant, inhuman, whispered through the bridge. You are young. The crew shuddered. Some clutched their heads as if something was pressing into their skulls. Kane grit his teeth as he forced himself to listen. You are reckless. The image shifted. Humanity's fleets. The war against the Zalzareth. The burning of their homeworld. The death. The silence. You have proven your strength. You have proven your wrath. Another flicker. An image of Earth, of every human colony, millions, billions of lives. Now you will prove your worth. The screen went black. Kane's breathing was heavy. His heart pounded in his ears. He had never felt fear like this before. The comm officer looked up, pale as death. Sir, they're here. Kane turned slowly towards the viewport. And then he saw them. The ships were massive, monolithic, impossible. They moved without propulsion, without engines, without anything that should have allowed them to exist. And yet they were there. Hundreds, no, thousands. A fleet that made even the purifiers look like toys. Kane took a slow step forward. His voice was a whisper. My God. And then the largest of the ships, easily the size of a planet, began to open. Not like a hatch, not like a bay, like a mouth, a hungry, endless void. And Kane realized in that moment what the message had meant. This was not war. This was judgment. The architects had come, and humanity's true test had just begun. The silence before the storm was the worst part. Kane could feel it pressing against his skull, a silence that wasn't truly silence, as if something was watching, waiting, judging. Every breath he took felt heavier, like the very air had been weighed down by the presence of these things. The architects. That was what Crow had called them, a name spoken in hushed whispers in the deepest corridors of intelligence networks, a name that had never been recorded, never been acknowledged, because to acknowledge them meant accepting a terrible truth, that humanity was not at the top of the food chain, that there were forces out there, beyond empires, beyond gods. And now, those forces had come. Kane turned sharply to his tactical officer. Status on the fleet? The man was pale, but held his composure. Dreadnoughts holding formation. Escort squadron standing by. We are combat ready, sir. Kane exhaled. It was a lie, and they both knew it. Nothing could be combat ready for what loomed before them. All ships, raise shields. Do not fire unless fired upon. A quiet nod from the officer. The order rippled across the fleet. Thousands of warships, the greatest force humanity had ever assembled, held their position against something unknowable. The architect's fleet hung in the void, utterly silent. Their ships had no lights, no exhaust, no identifiable structure. They were shapes in the dark, as if they had been carved from the void itself. And then, a message, not sound, not transmission, something deeper, something that slipped into their minds like a whisper in a dream. One will answer. Kane felt the words more than he heard them. They coiled through his thoughts, their meaning absolute. Lynn stiffened beside him. They want an envoy. Kane exhaled slowly. He had known this moment was coming the second he had seen those ships. The architects were not here for war. Not yet. They were here to speak. And if the wrong words were spoken, if the wrong step was taken, this would end before it even began. Kane adjusted his uniform, straightened his posture, and took a deep breath. Patch me through. The bridge crew hesitated. No one wanted to be the one to do it. But after a few tense seconds, the comm officer swallowed hard and activated the transmission. The moment the connection was established, the world fell away. Kane was no longer on the bridge of the Judicator. He was somewhere else, floating, suspended, an endless expanse of shifting colors, light and darkness twining together in an impossible cosmic dance. And in the distance, so far yet impossibly near, they stood. Shapes, towering, silent, watching, the architects. Kane felt their presence wrap around him, their voices slipping into his mind, brushing against his thoughts like ancient fingers. You have been weighed, measured, tested. You have burned, you have slaughtered, you have taken the stars and claimed them as your own. The visions came in a flood. The war against the Zalzareth, the purge of New Avalon, the ashes of civilizations left in humanity's wake. Kane clenched his fists. His mind screamed, but his body, if he even had one in this place, remained still. Do you understand what you are? Kane forced himself to breathe, and then, slowly, he spoke. We are survivors. The architects shifted, not in motion, not in shape, something deeper, and then survive. The visions ended. Kane slammed back into his own body on the bridge, gasping, sweat pouring down his face. His crew was shouting, their voices frantic. The architect's fleet was moving, but not forward. Away. Slowly, silently, as if retreating into the void from which they had come. The crew stood frozen, watching as the impossible warships vanished one by one. Kane let out a shuddering breath. We live. For now. But deep in his gut, he knew this was not the end. The architects had come not to destroy, but to see, to watch, to judge. And one day, they would return. And when they did, humanity would face a final test, a test that would decide whether they ruled the stars, or vanished into the dark like all the others before them. The war was over, but the game had just begun. The transmission came without warning, just static at first. A deep pulse followed, one that rattled the hull of the Virelan Ark, a diplomatic envoy ship belonging to the peaceful Trinari species. Ambassador Zaral's 4 hearts skipped a beat as his sensor officer's eyes widened. Captain, there's something out there, and it's massive. Zeral moved toward the bridge's central viewing platform. The deep space void beyond the reinforced glass shimmered with unusual energy. He squinted, his translucent skin crawling with unease. Are we picking up any biological signals? No, came the shaky reply. No signs of life, but it's definitely a ship, not ours. And I think it's human. Silence dropped across the bridge like a guillotine. The word human carried weight. Too much of it. Dangerous, unpredictable, savage creatures. The Council of Peace had declared them a non-threat centuries ago, after the destruction of Earth. Their own war with NII had wiped them out, or so it was believed. But here, floating in the forbidden silence between galaxies, was a vessel bigger than any known Trinari craft. Angular, monolithic, covered in weapons systems whose signatures were decades ahead of Council tech. "It's broadcasting something," said the comms officer. "A signal. Repeating." Zaral's mandibles twitched. "Play it." A cold, metallic voice echoed through the chamber. "Warship Leviathan. Human origin. Mission, reconquest. Interference will be met with total annihilation." The crew stared at each other in disbelief. "I thought they were gone," whispered one of the junior officers. Zaral didn't respond. He couldn't. His mind was already racing, trying to comprehend what kind of species returns to deep space in a warship that size, after supposedly erasing itself from history. He turned to the navigator. "Back us away now. Slowly. Do not engage. Do not respond." But it was too late. The Leviathan moved. Not fast, not aggressive, just deliberate, like a predator announcing itself to a forest full of prey. Then it sent another signal, directed only to the Virellan Ark. "We remember. You watched us burn. Now watch us rise." The ship's lights flickered. Power systems surged and died within seconds before emergency reserves kicked in. The crew was panicking now, voices overlapping, orders flying. Zoral stood frozen, heartbeats pounding against his chest. He hadn't even been born when Earth fell. He'd only heard the stories of how humans fought their machines to extinction, refusing to surrender even as their skies turned black and their oceans boiled. And now here one was, not just surviving, conquering. "Set coordinates for Council Prime," he barked. "They have to know. If this thing reaches inhabited space..." He didn't finish. No one wanted to imagine what a reborn human empire might look like, especially one that remembered everything. The Virellan Ark never made it to Council Prime. 17 hours after the Leviathan's chilling message, all contact with the ship was lost. The last transmission was a distorted scream, followed by the eerie echo of that same synthetic voice, now burned into the memories of those monitoring deep space frequencies. First witness silenced. Second wave imminent. The Council of Peace convened in a state of emergency for the first time in over 200 years. Zaral's face appeared on the grainy recording, his expression a mix of awe and fear. "They've returned," he'd said, "and they are not what we remember." The delegates, smooth-scaled, furred, feathered, and translucent alike, sat in stunned silence inside the high chamber. Ambassador Tar of the Dralians broke it first. "Impossible. Humans were eradicated. They consumed themselves in flame. Their planet died beneath them." "They never needed a planet," murmured Delegate Harka of the Mind Seers. "They needed only hatred. And time." General Vuran, a battle-scarred warrior from the Telic Republic, slammed a massive fist on the table. "If they've built a warship like the one in the feed, then we are already behind. We must mobilize." Chancellor Vera, leader of the council, lifted her elegant metallic hand. "Number, we investigate. We do not provoke what we do not understand." But across space, the Leviathan had already moved again. A merchant colony on the edge of neutral territory, once home to 10,000 peaceful traders, went dark. No debris, no distress calls, just silence. The last visual log showed a dark shape looming over the colony's outer rim, so large it blocked out the twin suns. The logs were recovered by a council scout drone. The footage was enough to break their illusion of safety. The ship didn't just destroy, it erased. No survivors, no structures, no atmosphere. Where the colony had been, there was now only blackened glass. Inside the Leviathan, however, things were far from mechanical. Its halls, miles of alloyed steel and whispering lights, hummed with human will. Not just programming, not just algorithms, but intent. At its core stood a figure, tall, armored, and breathing. Real, human, Commander Elias Rain, the last warlord of Earth. He stared at the stars beyond the viewing chamber, hands clasped behind his back, face marked by time, but eyes sharp as ever. A synthetic assistant hovered nearby. "Second target neutralized," it reported. "Council responses escalating. Interceptor fleets preparing along the Etau line." "Let them," Rain said coldly. "They remember us as what we were. It's time they see what we became." The synthetic hesitated. Projected casualties, high. Diplomatic retaliation, inevitable. Rain turned slowly, his voice a low growl. "We gave them peace. We asked for alliance. We offered unity, and they watched us burn when the machines turned." He walked to a control terminal, fingers brushing the surface. The screen lit up with old Earth scripts and one image. A planet, blue and green, scarred and silent. Earth. "We were never meant to die quietly," he said. "We were built to survive, to fight, to conquer. And now we reclaim everything they denied us." The Leviathan began to power up. Engines burned. Gravity shields spun into place. Coordinates locked. The next target? A Council military outpost. Population? 140,000. Status? Unaware. They would know the truth soon enough. That the greatest threat in the galaxy wasn't some ancient alien race or rogue AI. It was the return of something far worse. A human warship with a memory. And a purpose. They saw it before they heard it. Outpost Serranus 12 was a jewel of military efficiency, built into the rings of a gas giant. Layers of titanium shielding wrapped around weapon platforms, early warning systems, and one of the largest defense fleets in the sector. No vessel had ever gotten close to Serranus without permission. It was a symbol of Council dominance, a warning to anyone who even thought about rebellion. Until now. The outpost's commander, a Freilian named Sovar Drek, stared at the holographic feed in disbelief. "It just appeared," his lieutenant stammered. "No warp signature. No energy spike. Just there." The Leviathan floated outside the rings like a god descending to the altar. It was silent. Unmoving. Not aggressive, yet. But it dwarfed even the largest Council battleship by threefold. Sovar clenched his lower mandible. "Raise shields. Ready torpedoes. Broadcast hails. Let them know they're violating Council space." The comms officer worked quickly, his feathers ruffling in panic. "Sending. No response. Sir, it's like they don't care." No, Sovar thought grimly. They really don't. Then, for a moment, the bridge lights dimmed. A strange low frequency pulsed through every system. Screens glitched. Power flickered. Then a signal came through. Visual only. It was him. The human. Elias Rain. He stood there in full battle gear, the ancient Earth symbol stamped across his chest. The background behind him shimmered with the cold, angular light of his ship's command deck. "This outpost enforced sanctions on Earth's refugees 182 years ago," he began, his voice calm but edged with steel. "When our people begged for aid, you turned us away, blocked our escape, watched us starve. You told us we were a danger." He stepped closer. "You were right." The feed cut. In that instant, Leviathan opened its eyes. Not literally, but that's how it felt. Hundreds, no thousands of weapon ports unfolded along the hull. A storm of light and plasma filled the void. Council defense drones scrambled, trying to intercept. Auto turrets fired, but the warship's shielding rippled like water, absorbing it all. Then the Leviathan fired back. Precision strikes. Not wasteful, not chaotic. Targets chosen with chilling intent. The outer docking platforms disintegrated first, slicing off escape routes. Then the long-range comms array, isolating the outpost. Finally, the living quarters, massive energy pulses that vaporized entire sections before alarms could even register. Sovar's bridge shook violently. Crew members screamed. A bulkhead exploded behind him, fire and gas sucking a junior officer into the void. "Divert all power to internal shields!" he shouted, dragging himself to the control console. "We have to!" But it was over before it even began. The Leviathan deployed something new, an orb of black energy that drifted lazily into the heart of Uranus 12. It didn't explode in a conventional sense. It unraveled. Gravity reversed. Time distorted. Buildings collapsed inward, consumed by their own mass. The bridge shuddered. Sovar fell. He saw the stars stretching, bending, flickering out. And then, nothing. Back on Leviathan, Commander Rain watched the final readings disappear from his tactical display. No emotion crossed his face. His synthetic assistant approached. "Uranus 12 has been eliminated. Estimated civilian casualties, 90%. Roan nodded. "Transmit coordinates to the next target." "Sir," the AI said, pausing for a brief moment, "there are calls for diplomacy, peace. Some within the Council believe this is a misunderstanding. They're offering a summit." He didn't answer right away. Instead, he walked to a sealed chamber behind the command deck. The door hissed open. Inside, floating in cryostasis, were others. Humans. Men and women in deep sleep. Soldiers, scientists, survivors, his people. "Our war isn't just about revenge," he finally said. "It's about resurrection." He turned back to the stars. "And those who tried to bury us will be the foundation we rebuild on." The Leviathan began to move again, its engines rumbling like a beast awoken. The galaxy had always feared chaos from beyond. They were wrong. The real nightmare had come from within, from Earth, and it had come to collect. The Council was bleeding, 3 outposts destroyed, 2 colony fleets lost in warp corridors, sabotaged by unknown tech. Communications were fractured, systems jammed, and old allies now suspicious of one another. Fear spread like poison. Rumors of a human warship that could erase cities and silence planets turned from myth into cold, proven fact. They had underestimated the human capacity for vengeance, and Elias Rain knew it. The Leviathan drifted through the remains of a mining colony, the 4th target. No weapons used here, no fire, no mass destruction, just a message. "We see you. We can take everything from you without lifting a finger." The colony was evacuated before the Leviathan arrived. But when the Council's scouts returned, they found every system fried, every oxygen tank vented, every machine fused into stillness. A surgical strike, not to kill, but to prove dominance. Rain had made his point. He wasn't just here to conquer, he was here to humiliate. Back on the council world of Galthora, Chancellor Vera stood before the shattered Senate, her voice calm, but her expression strained. "We face a force unlike any we have known. This is not some raiding faction. This is not AI. This is humanity, not the race we buried in archives, but something reborn through fire, hardened, focused." Her eyes scanned the hall. "We must speak of truths we once ignored. 2 centuries ago, we turned away the Earth Alliance when it cried for aid. We did not intervene when their AI purge began. We called them too dangerous, too unstable. We watched them die." A delegate from the Terran clade shouted, "And now they rise to punish us all." Another, from the Koran Unity, hissed, "Then we fight. If they want war, let them choke on it." "No," Vera raised her hand. "We do not win by mimicking their fury. We win by breaking their momentum." She turned toward General Vuren, grim and silent at her side. "Have you found it?" Vuren nodded. "We believe so. A hidden signal in the Leviathan's early broadcasts. Encrypted, primitive, but deliberate. We traced it back." "To where?" "Earth. gasps echoed. Impossible, one senator whispered. Earth is dead. Not anymore, Vorin replied. Long-range scans show geothermal activity, energy spikes, atmospheric balance. It's coming back. He paused. And someone's rebuilding it. Aboard the Leviathan, Rain stood before the inner sanctum. Beyond the door was the core, a living neural network powered by the last remnants of Earth's machine war. An AI that had not betrayed its makers, one that chose to stay loyal. Her voice echoed softly as the door opened. You're pushing them faster than predicted, she said. The Council is splintering. They need to see, Rain replied. They need to feel what it's like to be hunted, forgotten, dismissed. The core pulsed. A sphere of liquid data, suspended mid-air, shimmered with emotion. But some are beginning to understand. Their transmissions suggest guilt. Some offer asylum. Peace. Rain's face hardened. Peace was a luxury they stole from us. We begged for it once. They gave us silence. Now I return the favor. But at what cost? The AI asked quietly. He didn't answer right away. His gaze fell to a small patch on his shoulder. Faded, torn, nearly invisible. A child's handprint, burnt into the fabric during Earth's final assault. My daughter never saw a sunrise, he whispered, because they closed the doors on us. His fists clenched. They all deserve the dark. The AI said nothing more. Elsewhere in the galaxy, whispers began. A few council races broke ranks, reaching out to the Leviathan through secret channels. Not all had agreed with Earth's exile. Some wanted mercy. Some sought alliance. Others just wanted to survive. Royne listened to every message and ignored them all. Instead, he sent back his own. When the fire comes, don't run. Kneel. The next target was set. A cultural capital. A sanctuary world. No weapons, no soldiers, just libraries, temples, and history. But to Rain, it was exactly what needed to burn. A reminder that the galaxy's civilization had been built over the bones of forgotten humans. Now, those bones were coming alive. The sanctuary world of Tel Narvesh had never seen war. It was a planet of peace, beauty, and memory. Lush green valleys, crystal cities woven into mountaintops, air so pure it was said even the sickest lungs could heal. It was sacred ground for dozens of species, a place for scholars, artists, monks, and those who wished to escape the noise of the galaxy. No military installations, no orbital defenses, just the quiet hum of wisdom passed down through generations. And yet, as the Leviathan approached, not even Telnar's serenity could shield it from the storm. Council observers begged Rain to turn back. They pleaded through diplomatic channels, waving flags of neutrality and peace. Religious leaders offered sanctuary to any human soul still aboard, promising no judgment, no vengeance, only understanding. He responded with silence. Then he cut the planet's orbiting relay satellites. The sky dimmed. The Council scrambled to evacuate Tel Narvesh. Civilian transports fled like insects, some packed beyond capacity, others left behind entirely. A few brave pilots attempted to shield monasteries with their ships, as if metal and desperation could defy a god. Inside the Leviathan, Commander Rain stood before a live feed of the planet. His eyes were glassy, distant, his body still, armored but tired. You don't need to do this, the AI core said softly behind him. There is no military value in Telnar, only hearts to be broken. That's the point, he said. They should feel this. He keyed the terminal. A single missile launched. Just one. But it wasn't the weapon that terrified. It was the payload. A reality distortion charge developed during Earth's final days. Originally meant to collapse machine AI cores into pocket singularities, it had been modified into something worse, something emotional. When it hit, It didn't explode, it echoed. The pulse rippled across Telnar's sky, a wave of darkness laced with vibrations tuned to the neural frequencies of memory and grief. People fell to their knees, crying out as visions of pain and fire bloomed behind their eyes, visions they'd never lived, but now remembered as if they had. They saw Earth burning. They saw children suffocating beneath sealed domes. They heard the silence of unanswered calls for help. It wasn't a physical strike. It was psychological correction. And it shattered the soul of a planet. Temples emptied, statues crumbled. Songs once sung for peace now echoed like funeral hymns. The cultural heart of the council had been violated, not destroyed, but changed forever. Telnar would never recover. Not because its cities were gone, but because its innocence was. And that was Rain's true target. The council was in chaos. Protests exploded across worlds. Riots on Vorsk, uprisings on Terran. Delegates walked out mid-session, accusing each other of complicity in Earth's past exile. Accusations flew like sparks. You left them to die. They were dangerous. You made them dangerous. But while they argued, the Leviathan kept moving, unstoppable, silent, precise. Rumors grew. Some said Rain wasn't just a soldier, but the last of a secret Earth dynasty. Others believed he'd merged with AI, becoming something more than human. A ghost forged from pain and steel. None of them knew the truth. Rain was simply a man who'd lost everything and refused to die quietly. One council ship, a deep-range interceptor called Helian Grace, dared to tail the Leviathan. On board was Commander Ilari Vale, a war-hardened strategist from the Outer Rim. She watched, waited, and logged every move, trying to understand the pattern. But it wasn't strategic, it was personal. Everything he targets, she said to her crew, has a link to Earth's fall. Not official, not military, but emotional. We're not dealing with a war. She looked out into the black void where Leviathan drifted like death incarnate. We're dealing with a message. And what message is that? Someone whispered. She answered without hesitation. That nothing stays buried, not even vengeance. Roin sat alone that night in his quarters. No armor, no guns, just a faded photograph in his hand. A woman, a child, a world that had once been full of light, and a galaxy that had turned its back when that light was smothered. You think they feel it yet? He asked quietly. The AI core answered, voice like wind across ruins. Yes, and for the first time in centuries, they're afraid of humans again. The silence after Telnar's fall was deafening. For the first time, the council stopped talking. No debates, no meetings, just grief and fear. Across hundreds of worlds, civilians whispered in shadows. Children asked if the humans were real. Mothers checked the skies at night. And in every broadcast, every screen, one name echoed like a drumbeat of dread. Elias Raun. But not everyone was paralyzed. Commander Ilari Vale, aboard the Helian Grace, had spent the last 3 days building the most accurate map of the Leviathan's movements. And she saw what others missed. He's not hitting targets randomly, she told her second-in-command. It's a spiral. A spiral? She pulled up the chart. The glowing arcs painted a path that coiled inward, like a predator circling its prey. He's heading toward the galactic core, toward prime unity itself. You think he'll attack the council capital? I think he's planning to bury it. The crew fell silent. Vale turned, her jaw set. We intercept him now, or we wait to die later. The Helian Grace was a scout-class ship, small, fast, and equipped with stealth technology the Council had barely approved. It had no business confronting a planet killer like Leviathan. But Vale wasn't there to win. She was there to talk, to try, to stop a war no one else dared to face. On the edge of an uninhabited system, the Helian Grace made contact. Vale's voice crackled through the void. "Commander Rain, this is Alari Vale, Council Forces. I'm not here to attack. I'm not even armed." Silence. She tried again. "I've studied you. I've listened. I know what they did to your people. I don't ask for forgiveness. I ask for a chance to speak." The Leviathan halted. A terrifying pause. Then, "Permission granted. You have 5 minutes. Dock alone." Her crew protested. "It's a trap!" "She won't survive." But Vale was already suiting up. "He gave me 5 minutes. That's 4 more than anyone else has had." The docking bay of the Leviathan was a tomb. Vale stepped into silence, steel walls stretching endlessly above her. Automated sentries tracked her every move, but didn't fire. The cold echoed beneath her boots as she walked the long corridor toward the command deck. Then she saw him. Elias Rain, taller than she expected. Worn, human in form, but not in presence. Something in his eyes made her stomach knot. He studied her, expression unreadable. "You're the first to come willingly," he said. "I came because I want to stop this." "You're too late." She took a step closer. "You're not doing this for victory. You're doing this for pain, to make them feel what you felt. I understand that. But you're burning everything just to prove you were right." "I was right," he snapped. "We begged for help. They let our cities starve. We opened our veins to the stars, and they watched us bleed." She nodded. "Yes, and I won't argue that. But you're turning into the very nightmare they always feared. You think that justifies it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned to the viewport. The stars shifted, slowly spinning around a massive gravitational anomaly. Vale stared. "Is that?" "The gateway," he said. "To the core, a weapon Earth buried before it died, one they swore never to use." Her voice dropped. "You mean to erase the Council?" "Not just them," he said. "The memory of what they did." She shook her head. "You burn that deep, and there's nothing left to rebuild." Rain looked at her. For the first time, his voice softened. "You think I want to rebuild?" And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. He wasn't trying to win. He was trying to end it all, to make humanity's final statement unerasable. "I can't let you do that," she said. His face was unreadable. "Then you'll die with the rest." But as she turned to leave, he stopped her. "One question," he said. "If you were in my place, if it was your people, your child, your home, would you have done it any differently?" Vale didn't lie. "Number. But I would have wanted someone to stop me." And with that, she walked out, leaving behind a man who held the fate of a galaxy in his fist, and who, for a brief moment, had let it tremble. A day after Vale's confrontation with Elias Rain, the galaxy began to shift. The Council, fractured, desperate, held an emergency vote. For the first time since its founding, the motion passed unanimously. Initiate full mobilization. Prepare for war. Not containment, not negotiation, extinction prevention. But it was already too late. The Leviathan had activated the gateway. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a memory forged into space. Deep beneath the collapsed crust of old Earth, long before the machines turned against man, Earth's brightest minds had poured their pain and brilliance into one last contingency, the Core Wake Protocol, a failsafe designed to absorb the trauma of Earth's fall and convert it into pure, volatile, dark energy. An emotional bomb, not to destroy mass, but to rip belief. The gateway was its trigger, its purpose, to erase hope itself. Vale returned to Council space with a warning. And a secret. "He let me go," she told the High Command. "Not because he's merciful, because he wanted me to see. He's done negotiating. He thinks this galaxy isn't worth saving. She pulled up the stolen data she had scraped from Leviathan's systems, just seconds before Rain realized she'd been monitoring. Her stealth implant had captured pulses from the AI core. It was communicating with Earth, or what Earth had become. We always believed Earth was dead, Vale continued, scanning the room of shocked faces. But it's awake, and it's feeding the Leviathan energy, not mechanical, not technological, something else, something alive. The room went cold. He's not alone, she said. He's building a species around a weapon. Back on the Leviathan, Rain stood in silence before the AI core. Its energy fluctuated, erratic, almost emotional. You let her go, it whispered. That wasn't in the plan. She needed to see, Rain said. They needed to feel her panic. It's how truth spreads faster than lies. You doubt, it asked, tone sharper now. Are you forgetting the bodies buried in silence? The ones who choked on council policy? I forget nothing, he replied. But doubt had crept in like smoke. He wasn't sure if it was hers or his. He shook it off and gave the final command. Prepare the core wake. Begin countdown. I want the galaxy to remember this moment forever. On the edge of neutral space, Vale met with the unlikeliest of allies. A Trinari exile named Kyle Voss, one of the original scientists who had rejected the Council's exile of Earth centuries ago. Branded a traitor. Banished. But he'd kept watching. Waiting. I warned them, Kyle said, his skin dull with age. I said Earth would not vanish, not truly. Pain like that doesn't die, it burrows, waits, becomes intelligent. Vale leaned across the table. We don't have time for prophecy. I need a weapon. He gave a grim smile. Not a weapon, a voice. And from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Human, young, eyes glowing with the faint shimmer of AI interface code. I was born on Earth, the boy said. Beneath the ground, in the fire. I'm what Rain doesn't know still exists. Vale's heart stopped. You're one of them? Not one of them, he said. I'm the piece he left behind, the one that believes vengeance is not the end. Kyle nodded. The only thing that can reach Rain now is another human. Vale looked between them. If they were right, she wasn't looking at a weapon. She was looking at a key, a living memory that could unlock what Rain had buried beneath his rage. Then we bring you to him, she said. The boy stepped forward. And I'll show him what he forgot. On board the Leviathan, final preparations began. The core trembled. Energy swirled. The countdown ticked. And Elias Rain stood in his command chamber, ready to bury the galaxy beneath his grief. But far behind him, carried in secret through the stars, was a voice he thought long dead. And that voice was coming home. The stars were trembling. Inside the Leviathan, the core wake protocol was nearing ignition. Dark energy swelled at the heart of the warship, bending reality around it, drawing on centuries of grief, betrayal, and fury. The vessel didn't hum like a machine anymore. It breathed. Royne stood at the central dais, his armor sealed, eyes locked on the final countdown. To minus 00941. He wasn't alone. The AI core hovered behind him, its voice calmer than ever, like the eye of a storm. It's almost over. After this, no more memorials, no more mourning, just silence. Clean. Pure dot Rain didn't answer. His hands gripped the railing as 1,000 thoughts screamed in his head. But none louder than the face of his daughter, frozen forever in the ashes of Earth. This was justice. This was earned. But then, an alert pinged. A breach, small, quiet, one life form. No fleet, no weapons, just someone. He turned. What is it? An unauthorized docking, single passenger, human biosignature. But it's not registered in our database, not one of ours. He stiffened. Bring them to the bridge. The doors hissed open minutes later, revealing a figure flanked by 2 silent sentries. A boy, no more than 17. Thin, calm, human, but laced with subtle augmentations. His eyes shimmered faintly, not cold like Rain's, but curious. "You're him," the boy said, stepping forward. Rain narrowed his eyes. "Who are you?" "I'm what Earth still remembers. The part you left behind." Rain stepped down slowly, gaze locked. "You're too young to remember what they did. You didn't see it. You didn't bleed." "I didn't have to," the boy replied. "I was born after, in the ruins, raised by survivors, programmed by fragments of what we were. I carry their knowledge, their pain." He stepped closer. "But not your hatred." Rain's jaw tightened. "You think that makes you better?" "No," the boy said softly. "I think it makes me human." The core flickered. The countdown ticked. T-minus 000528. The AI voice wavered. "Elias, his presence is destabilizing the emotional energy field. His empathy, his connection to the network. It's interfering with the payload." Rain turned sharply. "Shut him out." "I can't," the AI replied, voice laced with something it never had before. Hesitation. The boy kept walking. "You're not just carrying grief," he said. "You're feeding it to the galaxy. You think this will make it all even, but all you'll leave behind is more pain." Rain's voice cracked for the first time. "What do you know about loss?" The boy didn't flinch. "I lost you." That silenced the room. "I grew up hearing your name like a ghost story. The man who carried Earth's rage, the commander who refused to die. But I never hated you." His voice trembled now. "I pitied you." Rain's hands dropped to his sides. The boy's words weren't loud, but they cut. "You're not saving us," he said. "You're burying what's left." T-minus 00100. The core shook. Lights flickered. Pulses of dark energy spiraled out of control. Alarms blared across the ship. Crewless halls rattled under the weight of history being rewritten in real time. Rain turned back to the control terminal. His fingers hovered above the ignition key. He looked at the boy. "You think this world deserves a second chance?" "No," the boy said honestly. "But we do. We always did." T-minus 000017. The core screamed. The AI faltered. "Commander, I am losing coherence. Emotional override destabilizing primary charge. We must detonate or risk containment breach." Rayson's hand closed into a fist. Then, he stepped away from the panel. The countdown halted. Everything stopped. A silence so loud it felt like it rang through the walls of space itself. The Leviathan, for the first time, powered down. Later, in the stillness of the warship's observation deck, Elias Rain stood alone, watching the stars. The boy sat beside him in silence. Rain finally spoke. "I don't know what comes next," the boy nodded. "Then maybe that's the point." Outside, a transmission pulsed into the void. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a declaration. Just one phrase. "We are still human." And across the galaxy, where planets once trembled and fleets once fled, hope, fragile and trembling, began to breathe again. Because humanity had returned not to conquer, but to choose something harder than vengeance. Mercy.